Tore it up, girl.
Only sang for like 30 seconds.
Cause you that good. Cause they heard what they need to hear. He was shooing you. If they don't pick you, then I might have to do some gangster shit.
Now it is safe to say when it comes to Juke, she has suffered a lot of heartbreaks, and we know it wouldn't be Jukebox if there weren't some more tears, so there will be more tears. However, there is a lot more to Juke's character, and what inspired this video was this post by Raising Kanan Stars on social media, how it started versus how it's going. We're now 3 seasons in, and even though we saw a lot of maturity in regards to how Juke viewed the world that they lived in as early as season 1, we've had to be patient when it comes to her relationships, especially with Marvin. At the end of season 2, we saw her come back, and for the first time I think in their relationships, they started to experience heartbreaks and traumas at the same time in the same environment, and they realized that they could lean on each other in some type of way. So little things like that we'll see throughout season 3 really help them to kind of start to forge some kind of relationship. So in this video, we're going to be running through some of the layers that help them build that relationship. We're going to take a look at the change in her relationship with Marvin, and basically how we've seen a role reversal with Lulu. We're also going to touch on her singing career, the trauma, growth and maturity that Juke has shown at such a young age, because as much as we're watching Kanan's growth and journey, we do also need to learn how Juke turned into this savage, which I think Marvin's death will play a huge role when it does eventually happen, which I'm not saying will happen in season 3, I do want to make that point. I do think Marvin will make it to season 4, but eventually I think we all know how this story will end with Juke turning out the way she did. So with that being said, Hailey Kilgore did thank us for our patience over these last couple of seasons, but know that she's getting there in Raising Kanan Season 3. Now when we take a look at the older Juke, we could tell that this was a character that had been through a lot at such a young age. She was ice cold when she spoke to Kanan about how Sean was a pawn. She had a complete disregard for human life, and I think she struck fear into those around her because they knew what she was capable of and who they were dealing with. She was always a woman with a plan, stick to it or find out what happens if you don't. Now I wouldn't go as too as to saying Ghost and Tommy were scared of her, because we know what Tommy is capable of. We've also seen what Ghost and Kanan could do, but I definitely think they knew what Juke was about when they were younger. And these are the layers that the writers are being very patient with when it comes to her character. Ever so slowly they're molding her character into the older Juke, through loss of loved ones like Nicole and Kenya in both seasons 1 and 2. But there is more. She felt this betrayal from her uncle Lou when she thought he was the only one who had her back, only for her to give her song to Ziza. When it came to Marvin, you could feel the awkwardness from the start. He really didn't take an interest in her singing or what she was studying at school, and he never really knew his daughter like a father should, which of course stems from who he was, and also the time he spent being away from Juke when he did his bid in Elmira. So towards the end of season 1, we saw Juke going through a double dose of trauma. Not only did she lose Nicole through the bad batch of drugs that Kanan cooked, but Marvin attacked her after he found out about her sexuality, something which wasn't commonly accepted back in those days. This meant Juke left her home and moved back in with Aunt Rock for the second time. So let's not forget, for the period that Marvin was inside prison, Juke stayed with Aunt Rock, and her influence can't go unnoticed.
No, I can't let you get up on that stage without some.
Aunt Rock is beautiful.
Growing up without both parents, that is going to do a lot of damage, along with the heartbreak and trauma. And then we have the influence of someone like Rock, which is something we'll come back around to at some point this season, when we do talk about their relationship in a bit more detail, and how I think Kanan will feel betrayed by Juke when she lets Rock know what he's been up to. But in regards to her journey in season 2, she went searching for this happiness elsewhere, because she clearly wasn't finding it back home in Queens. She was aware of the fucked up world that they were living in and the dangers that come with it, which also showed how mature she was compared to Kanan. However, we do have to remember that even though both are growing up in a world which forces you to grow up and level up quick, the writers did do a great job in reminding us they're also just kids and do what kids normally do. They go to Girardi's, buy pizza and play some arcade games. They show us the young side, the loving side, but also how she could flip from Laverne to Jukebox in a heartbeat because she's also always been a hustler. While others got studio time because of their connections, she had to grind and find her own way, which is shit that happens in real life, especially in the corporate world. Bosses always have their favorites, and some of us had to work twice as hard to get to the same position as the guy sitting next to you, but it is what it is. Juke accepts the world that she lives in, and she was still hungry to make a name for herself with music.
What do you like to do? What interests you?
I sing.
Singing's not a career, it's a pastime.
I think when it comes to Juke this season, she does feel a lot of guilt and remorse about what happened with Nicole and Kenya. There's some part of her that really wants to make it as a singer, but she suffered so much loss and heartbreak, she's now confused. Beck's death also puts everything into perspective once again. Another who had an influence on Duke, which does then kind of mess with her head, where she's then looking to make a quick exit from Queens by joining the military. Now she was thrown a lifeline by Mr. Bingham and Marvin not giving up on Duke's dream, and so this brings me on to her relationship with Marvin.
Well,
We've been through the history of why Marvin and Duke's relationship was the way it was, but when Duke went to go search for some happiness with Kenya, that actually brought her and her father closer. But let's give some credit to Marvin and what he's done. He had to take a huge step back and realize that he needed to find himself before approaching Duke again. At the beginning of season 2, he tried to speak to Duke without even saying sorry. So from Duke's point of view, that moment in time, the relationship was completely done. Marvin then had to take a step back and in essence, recreate himself. He went to anger management classes with Renee, took more of a calmer approach to situations, and he was there to stand up for Duke as a father should. So as Duke saw that his father was actually trying for the first time, she appreciated him, and now there's no bigger supporter of Duke than Marvin. This hug that we saw at the audition, this isn't something you'd ever imagine we'd see after what we saw towards the end of season 1, especially because it was a relationship which Hailey Kilgore said was irreparable, which she also admitted in an interview was a misdirect for us as the audience, but it has been great to see them come together and also humanize Marvin's character in more ways than one. Now when we talk about the role reversal of Marvin and Duke's relationship from then and now, the writers have also flipped the script with Lou and Duke. Throughout seasons 1 and 2, majority of the time we saw Lou being the one to push Duke on to do her thing with music. He was the biggest supporter by getting her into the studio, by getting her onto stage and pushing her where Marvin wouldn't. But then we saw this move with Ziza, which she did forgive, only for him to let her down yet again in season 3 episode 3 by being arrested and missing her audition. So I actually do feel bad for Duke, and look, I even wouldn't blame her if she now had the mindset of, I'm done with people letting me down, that's one too many for my liking, so me and you, we're done, which is why I feel Hailey Kilgore teased. They set the foundation so we care about her, and now she starts to play chess in her life. She's starting to step into the driver's seat. So this is where I do think we're going to start to see Duke taking control, where she says enough is enough. She's the one who's making the chess moves and dictating what moves to make from now on, without relying too much on others, because we've seen what happened twice now with Uncle Lou. Now I do feel with Duke more in control, she is in for some happy moments. She smashed her audition out the park without her track, and she will be one of 3 in this girl group with Crystal and Aisha being the other 2. What happens beyond that, I think we all know it's never going to end well for a singing career, but let's see how far they take it, with Crystal being the character who will apparently take more of the spotlight. Now circling back around to the beginning of this video, the question was, what makes Duke's character into the one we saw in Power? What makes her so cold? As I mentioned throughout this video, I don't think it's just one thing. It's going to be a combination of loss of loved ones, the trauma that she's faced, betrayal, heartbreak, and her losing her way with music. But I also feel they're setting up Marvin to be a huge loss, which I think will be the biggest moment and turn for Duke's character. We all know they've managed to rebuild this relationship, with Marvin being Duke's biggest supporter, but look, at some stage we also need to learn how the story ends for all of these characters, apart from Kanan and Duke, and I do feel some will end up in prison, but for many of them, Marvin included, I do think they'll end up dying, especially because of who they are, and how Marvin's death will contribute to Duke's overall character development. I mean, him going out protecting Duke, or taking a bullet sacrificing himself, really would be the most tragic way to go out, and really would suck any humanity left out of Duke. We've spoken about the loss, the trauma, betrayal, and lies, but her relationship with Marvin is a shining light in this dark world, and if you were to take that away from her, along with her music, what would she have left?